they left me, I was kicked out as a teen for false rumors passed by my brother. 28-year-old female with twin brother. My twin brother and I grew up getting somewhat different treatment from our parents. As the so-called black sheep, my parents really appeared convinced, for some reason, that my brother was destined for brilliance while I was more interested in sports or hanging out with friends than in academics. Their continuous comparisons demoralized me and damaged my self-esteem. I was treated like an afterthought when a child, having to watch my brother throw lavish birthday celebrations with friends. While I was never even allowed to bring guests back to our house, he frequently slept over with them. To be really honest, I hated every minute of my youth. My grandma seemed to be the only family member who really gave me any thought. She always brought my preferred chocolates and sometimes dropped a few bucks to me so I could treat myself later when she visited us. This obvious preference for my twin brother evolved over the years into emotional abuse aimed at me. My parents would publicly criticize my hobbies and academics. No matter how hard I tried, I could seem to satisfy their ideal of the perfect child. Though I excelled in athletics, they forbade me from engaging in extracurricular activities since they wanted me to focus exclusively on schoolwork, exactly as my brother. It was annoying, and as a little child I felt powerless. I grounded once again later in my sophomore year, this time the crime was having Snapchat on my phone. Apart from all teenagers my age, I had done absolutely nothing wrong, except I had downloaded this app to keep in touch with my buddies. But since my parents had prevented me from talking with my pals, this was a major offense and a betrayal of their trust, said my parents. They went batshit insane on me, dumped all of my stuff around the room, then removed the doors from their hinges and informed me I would have no privacy as long as I lived under their roof. Seeing my parents treat me this way, my identical brother made my life worse instead of helping me. Our parents' unfair behavior produced a poisonous surroundings that let him take advantage of the circumstances. He started lying about me, accusing me of things I never done so he might get away with everything. Should he steal something, he would easily point the finger on me and my parents, already inclined to view me negatively. His falsehoods were easily accepted. He would make fun of my appearance and belittle me in front of my schoolmates. Still, I had a large group of friends at school because I was friendly and open about forming relationships. But my twin, an introvert, felt uncomfortable and started to hate that I could interact with people. When no one came up for his birthday at our 14th birthday celebration, this jealously peaked. While in sharp contrast, my friends took me ice cream and I had an overall great day. I have no idea why his friends did that to him. This enraged my brother still more. My brother started spreading false accusations about me at school, presenting me as a spoilt child, in order for retribution. Since our parents liked him more, he misled everyone by saying I was physically mistreating him at home. I had no idea he went to such a terrible degree. He would punch himself, carefully causing injuries like a black eye or bruised shoulder, in order to create evidence. He would boldly enter school the next day showing the self-inflicted injuries as evidence of my claimed brutality and create stories. He would lie, claiming that his injuries were from innocent sports like football with pals, whenever our parents asked him about them. People started to trust his twisted view of events as the lies and his claimed black eyes gained momentum. Whispers soon spread and even my friends started to glance at me with mistrust. I first observed minute changes. People who used to converse with me in the halls suddenly started to fade. Group hangouts started to get fewer and more spaced apart invitations. People hesitated to be around the apparently spoilt girl accused of aggression, as if a switch had been turned off. I plucked the bravery one day to ask my former best buddy why our relationship had deteriorated. She talked about how my twin brother had been spreading gossip about me. She exposed the thorough lies he had told everyone, charging me of things I had never done. Hearing her say startled me. The sensation was one of mistrust mixed with incredulity, as though the ground under me had collapsed. Someone I grew up with, my brother, was fabricating stories about me, accusing me of doing things I would never have even considered. That was a devastating betrayal that left me with a knot in my gut and a weighty heart. The day I addressed my brother at school, he chose to ignore me. When I urged him to stop lying about me, he grinned at me and told me I deserved to rot alone. His falsehoods and actions were beginning to worry me, thus I found it difficult to express myself. Though I wanted to talk to my parents, I worried they would view my brother above me. Particularly considering that I had always been open to befriending others, the isolation pained. The lies driven by jealousy from my brother seemed to be destroying the relationships I had developed over years. Teachers too started to become caught in the rumors. It was a dreamlike sensation, as though I were living in a parallel universe in which the evil narrative woven by my twin eclipsed my actual self. The lies were influencing people's actual impressions of me, not only teenage chatter. They had evolved beyond simple gossip. The terrible news soon got to my principal, and suddenly my worst nightmare materialized. Along with our parents, the main called my brother and me straight into his office to go over these supposedly rumors. Heart thumping, I sat there as the principal insisted on the reality. Though I expected my brother would at last come clean, he doubled down on the lies. He told the principal straightforwardly that, indeed, the allegations were accurate and characterized me as a bully who roamed about physically assaulting him while our parents were not around. I found it hard to believe. My brother kept telling this twisted tale about how I was furious at him for getting more attention from our parents, and shock flooded over me. Though everything of it was lies, he stayed to his tale like glue. Hearing my brother's tale, my mother started to cry. She grabbed onto my brother if he were some sort of hero. Telling my brother that he was brave to speak up and that he would be ensuring nothing would ever happen to him, my dad sought to console him. That day, I tried to defend myself by begging the principal that everything was made up. Desperate to swim to the top, I felt as though I was drowning in a sea of accusations. Yet, my brother persisted in saying that I was this furious, aggressive person venting daily on him. As my mother clutched onto my brother, my tears kept flowing and I started to see accusing stares. It was like battling a wall of belief in my brother's invented narrative. Saying the school didn't accept bullying and that these were reasons to punish me, my principal chastised me severely. I begged him not to suspend me, but he shook his head, declaring he couldn't let it slip. Tears running down my face, I begged him to understand that I did nothing to help my brother. The main insisted that I would be suspended for 10 days so that others may learn from this never to bully anyone. It really hit me, and I started crying even more, almost asking him to think twice. Furious and ashamed of the overall state of affairs, my parents hauled me from the principal's office. I refused to go. They were not understanding what I intended to provide as my argument. We left the institution, my heart weighed with shame and frustration. Things changed dramatically when we arrived home. Out of the blue, my dad started packing my stuff. Startled, perplexed, I had no idea what was occurring. When my mother questioned him what he was doing, he simply yelled that he cannot allow my brother to live in the same house anymore. I begged my brother to give them the truth, almost on my knees, but he stayed frigid, unmoved by my tears. After finishing packing, my dad dumped the luggage into our foyer. Still pleading my dad not to kick me out, I grabbed to his legs. Like a dream coming to pass. A bully like me didn't deserve to dwell in his house, he told me, and he would ask his mother, my grandma, to come fetch me up should she so want. The planet seemed to have collapsed under my feet. Surrounded by my stuff strewn in the foyer, booted out from my own house, I stood there shocked. My grandmother did show up finally. She helped me get into the passenger side by gathering all my stuff and arranging it in the car. Before approaching my parents' front door, she checked to be sure I had on my seatbelt. She rang the doorbell, then started to shout at my dad for treating me this way when he opened it. She cautioned him sternly that she would not hesitate to engage the police or CPS should he ever approach me or try to get in touch once more, as what he had done to a child like me may eventually land him in prison. Trying to avoid responsibility, my mother said it was mine. But my grandmother wasn't feeling it at all. Emphasizing that I was only a young child who deserved not to be abused in such a merciless way, she stood her ground defending me. I had never felt such power in my life till then, from my grandmother. She trusted me rather than cowering to my parents as they thought. We finally left, my house the only place I had ever grown up in, behind us. It is impossible for me to adequately describe how intolerable the suffering I went through during that period. Though my grandma begged me to, I recall simply crying on the bed and not eating anything. She was likewise startled when I told her what my brother had done. She told me she thought my side of the story, and it made me glad at least one person had my back. The idea of going back to school was like stepping back into a lion's den once the 10 days of suspension ended. The faces of my students told volumes as I walked into the known hallways, judgment, murmurs, and sidelong glances. The weight of the unfounded charges hung in the air. My brother, meantime, deliberately disregarded me and behaved as though I didn't exist. A few people who saw him as the victim of my assaults and agreed his side of the story had grown friends with him. No matter how hard I attempted to present my side of the narrative to anyone, it was ignored. I was an outsider, labeled unfairly and carried around like a shadow wherever I went. The classroom, the cafeteria, the hallways, the eyes that locked with mine were contemptuous and mistrustful. I started to go alone. I would head down, show up for every class, have lunch by myself in the cafeteria, and head straight home. I had no friends, and it seemed as though everyone just didn't want me there. My parents never once phoned to see how I was doing throughout all this. My grandma would tell me again and over that life would finally be good and that this was not my fault. Having decent marks when I finished from high school, I was looking forward college, where maybe I would have a better life. I first felt what freedom felt like only when I left for college. Nobody was monitoring my shoulders, none was comparing my marks, and none was trying to challenge me, for the first time. I ran into like-minded folks and developed friendships with them. Though my family and peers had caused emotional and physical scars over the years, I focused on putting all behind me and savoring this collegiate experience as much as I could. It was around this period that I developed my flair for content writing. Though I had always wanted to be a writer, I chose to give up on my ambition as I wasn't sure whether it would be long-term viable. But I decided to start freelancing and writing in order to pick some side money. Signing up on several freelancing platforms helped me land work from well-known companies. I began gradually compiling a portfolio of my works this way. I kept this side project throughout college and never approached my parents for one penny. Instead of landing a corporate job upon my college graduation, I discovered I could work full-time in content writing. The several clients and long-term professional ties I had with them helped them to rope me into several initiatives of theirs, thereby enabling me to be doing rather well. Having a respectable freelancing profession let me travel the globe as a digital nomad in addition to make me financially independent. Though it was certainly not easy, traveling helped me heal from past. I grabbed as much as I could and gambled on myself. I have seen so much of the globe throughout the years, yet I still have so much to see. My grandma was the only member of my family I thought about all through all this. I really loved her. When I moved out, Mother was quite depressed, yet she knew I had to be independent on my own. Though I have a busy schedule, I would make it a point to be with her whenever I could. On the weekends, I would go see her, usually sitting on the porch or enjoying meals together, lost in talks ranging from childhood stories to more current events. On weekends, I would spend whole days assisting Mom with housework or taking her for a leisurely stroll to the neighborhood park. Lately I finished one of the most significant assignments of my career. Though I cannot name the brand, I was quite fortunate to create blogs and product descriptions for them. Following the assignment, I asked the team I collaborated with to offer me favorable feedback on my website, which they were more than glad to do. Knowing working with this brand was a big event, so I grabbed screenshots of some of their evaluations to publish on Instagram. Many additional content creators, as predicted, contacted me to celebrate my professional achievement and even shared my tale to assist in dissemination. This is how I began receiving messages from random people needing assistance with their websites. Some of my family also spotted this and contacted out to congrats me. Eventually, the principal of my college got in touch. Seeing that I was doing so well, he had gotten in touch with me and asked me to visit college for a lecture to discuss career paths as a content writer to students. Though I struggle with public speaking, I was really anxious, so I decided to take a chance and consented. My life seemed to have gone full circle when I stood before expectant faces imparting my knowledge and views. In my lecture, I discussed the difficulties I encountered and how I persevered in spite of many demanding days. Empowering others and helping the writers' community flourish was, quite honestly, a really rewarding experience. As individuals related to several of my clips, they began to go popular on Facebook groups. Being at last appreciated for my effort felt fantastic. I received an invitation to speak on a local news station last week. The presentation highlighted the advantages of content writing, and they asked me to share with their viewers my path and observations. Though a little anxious, the chance excited me. I discussed my experiences, the value of client feedback, and how a little thank you note might create amazing possibilities during the show. The chance to inspire more people in the profession and appeal to a larger audience humbles and excites me. I also posted some of these snippets on Instagram when it eventually aired, as I felt honored to be asked to a TV show. My cousins and family first began learning about my work performance this way. You see, my parents had no knowledge that I was working with well-known businesses and receiving invites to TV shows, as they never discussed me with anybody. This is how rapidly information got out inside my family. I suppose this TV interview must have at last made sense to my parents. A few days later, I was working on another job and found my phone quiet. When I checked my phone after finishing my work, I found 6 missed calls from my mother. Surprised her name on my phone truly startled me, since it had been a long time since she had phoned me. After all those years of quiet, I couldn't understand why she was phoning. I hesitated, then called her back, and she picked up right away. When I asked her if everything was good, my mother started praising me. Usually seated right there with Mom, my dad also joined in the discourse. He began asking about my life and well-being, and I responded without much thinking. It wasn't odd until they started asking how much I was making these days. My dad answered that we were family, thus I shouldn't be shy sharing with them my salary, since it is none of their concern. I assured him I was doing financially really well. Hearing this, My mother started to explain how difficult their life was these days. My brows wrinkled with mistrust. Here is essentially our conversation's general flow. Mom. We have been wishing to remodel the house for some time. We are retired now. Though we have no savings left, its shape is not ideal. Me. Okay. Mom. We have hope since your success. Having seen your TV interview today, we reasoned perhaps you could assist us by covering the renovations costs. Dad. We are family first of all. You should not hesitate to forward some of your income to us. We truly need your assistance. Me? Are you teasing me? Having not even spoken with you for years, why are you requesting money? While I appreciate the congrats, I am not going to assist you in any capacity. I wonder what motivated you to get in touch to me. Hearing this, my mother began to remark how I should have been appreciative and that I should have helped them as family. My dad also said that this was the least I could do, since my parents deserved to be looked for. I wanted to give them some of my thinking since I was so offended at this. I thought suddenly of something. Rather than merely fighting with them, I chose to teach them a lesson for lifetime since mistreating me all those years ago caused them to leech off me. I informed my parents I would be ready to assist them should they agree to my requests solely. My dad asked me, perplexingly, what they were. I immediately set out my demand. If they sought my assistance, they had to openly acknowledge in front of our family and friends that my brother was the brains behind the nasty allegations damaging my name. Believing their lies and manipulation would help them to humiliate my brother the same way they had humiliated me before everyone. I wanted them to own their deeds and admit the suffering they had caused. Hearing my impossible condition, my dad started to doubt the need of such an admittance. I stood my ground even though my mother informed me that this was all pretty pointless and that we could have a private conversation apart from others. This condition was non-negotiable, that was what any help they sought for in the future required. My dad spoke up as the tension grew, stressing his part as my father and underlining that it was my obligation to assist my needy family. Emphasizing the years they had spent raising me, my mom, in a last-ditch effort, urged me to act morally and assist them. Their abrupt appeal struck me as ironic. I reminded them of the past, of the fact they had kicked me out, and of the fact my grandmother had reared me, not they. They were increasingly restless, but I firmly reminded them that if they wanted to approach me and ask for my financial help going forward, then the truth had to be admitted publicly and my brother had to pay repercussions for his deeds. My folks have been calling me non-stop since our chat, but I'm avoiding their calls. Even phoning them back that day makes me regretful. If I did nothing at all to assist my parents, would I really be in the wrong? Update 1. Since I last told my tale a week ago, things have been a whirl. And the help and encouragement I have been getting from everyone has been deluging. Knowing that I'm not alone at this period makes one hopeful. After all they have gone through, I am happy everyone feels I should not interact with my parents or even think about helping them out. I knew it was quite almost impossible for them to do, hence I even set them such a condition. Though they might have discovered by now that it was all his lies, I know they will never put my brother through what they put me through. They love him too much. After my parents once more tried to get in touch with me today, my brother sent me a nasty text message. I ignored their calls. He composed this. Hey sis, I can tell you every day without you in my life has been fantastic. It's been a long time since I seen you. Mom and Dad contacted you, from what I heard, and you gave them an insane directive. You know, they never are going to follow through on it. They will never do anything to damage me, and they most obviously never loved you. Although I did lie about you 15 years ago, it has been a long time since then, hence cease being so self-serving and attempt to let go from the past. You are childless and single anyway. Hence why would you not want to assist them with house repairs and renovations? Act moral and be a better daughter. Seeing the letter felt as though it were a stab to the chest. His lack of empathy was evident in the boldness to discount the hardships I had gone through and the conditions I had established. Emphasizing my single and childless status, the effort to guilt-trip me added still another degree of insensitivity. Not only was his implication that I should put their needs ahead of my own well-being objectionable, but it also underlined how little he considered me. Frustrated and driven by a deep need for justice, I determined it was time to intervene and expose the truth buried for too long. Sitting down to send an email to my parents and close relatives, I shared the terrible facts of my life and the unfair treatment I had suffered in my family house. In the email, I detailed how my parents treated me differently from my twin brother and the rigorous and repressive surroundings I had lived under. The email also explored the damaging and wholly false rumor my brother had disseminated about me in school, which had resulted in serious repercussions and damaged my name. I wrote on how my parents had kicked me out to the curb and how, had it not been for my grandma, by now I may have been dead in the streets. I encouraged everyone to read a note my brother had emailed toward the end. I included a screen grab showing him owning to lying about me. It was an unambiguous confession meant to reveal the lies that had lasted far too long. Just an hour ago, I wrote the email. Once my parents and brother see it, all hell will explode. I will let you know nextwise on how my family responds to my email. Update 2. My last update was 1 month ago, and as you might imagine, a lot of things have transpired this month. My family burst upon getting the email. Relatives who were earlier ignorant of the degree of the favoritism and emotional abuse have criticized my parents. Many of the family members contacted me apologizing for not being there for me and stating they had no idea about all this. I decided to contact a lawyer after my brother and dad sent me a torrent of text messages beginning to get increasingly violent and nasty. She sent a notice of cease and desist. It essentially advised them not to get in touch with me anymore and that, should they do, they would suffer severe legal repercussions. Given they ceased getting in touch, I suppose this must have terrified them straight. My grandmother supports me 100% since she believes I have done the right thing by informing everyone what occurred. She is the only person that counts to me, hence I'm happy she has my back. Update 3. 2 months apart have gone between my last update. For now, I am glad to say that all in my life is running smoothly. Professionally, my article writing company has been doing great. The offers to present at podcasts and seminars keep coming in, therefore confirming my reputation as a valued professional in my field of work. I am now as near to my grandmother as ever. Recently I took a 1-week vacation from work so I could spend some time with her. These days she enjoys gardening and taught me a lot about different herbs and flowers in her yard. My best and most treasured memories are the times I spend with her, meal sharing, deep talks, or just hanging around. I'm glad my family is keeping away from me since they haven't contacted me since the letter my attorney sent them. Since I personally started attending therapy, hopefully I can work on mending myself. Right now I believe this will be the last update. Wife left me looking after my dying father, but she returned crawling after dad made me a millionaire in his bequest. Married for 8 years, I am a 36-year-old man with 2 children. I also am the sole son of my sick father. You know, my dad has been dealing with renal issues for many years. Unfortunately, his condition has gotten worse over the past 2 to 3 years and he now requires twice-weekly dialysis. He could drive on his own earlier, but during the past year he usually asked me to go with him. He is becoming weaker daily as well. I had developed a schedule for myself whereby I would be dialysing my father every time. I do not want to abandon him under this state by himself. He needs to go for dialysis 2 days a week, hence I scheduled Saturday and Wednesday. I have Saturday off from work, hence it is not a problem. My supervisor gave me permission to go early on Wednesday, and then I worked late into the night after dialysis to make up the missing hours. After 10 years of employment with this organization, my supervisor has viewed me as a dedicated and devoted worker, hence, giving this particular authorization was not really important to him. Still, the issue started at home with my 34-year-old wife Ayil. She became irate when she learned that I will be on dialysis twice a week bringing my dad. She was not happy when I used to take him sometimes, but she never voiced her annoyance directly. She couldn't stop herself now that I had taken up the conscientious responsibility. She claimed that wasting my time on my father was useless as, whatever I did, he would never be impressed by me. Here's a bit of background to this then. My dad runs a merchandise company. He had obtained some reasonable wealth and was rather off. I was driven about something else while he wanted me to run his company. I was drawn to technology. Creating software and programming excited me. I thus pursued a software degree after school, whereas Dad wanted me to study administration or business. He was still good with that as long as I was ready to work for his business. But once I graduated, I started working for a well-known IT company. Dad objected to me working for someone else instead of carrying on his legacy. I stalled as he insisted on having me join his company. When Dad asked me one more time whether I wanted to join after my marriage, I answered no. Dad lost it and declared he would donate all of his fortune to charity and that I would not get a penny. I stayed exactly at my choice. You see, I was doing nicely even at that age. At 29 I purchased my own house and a car. Even without his fortune, I felt rather sure I could lead a reasonable existence. I explained to him I could create wealth on my own and I didn't need his money. Our relationship broke down after that. Mom died from heart arrest 5 years ago. For Dad, it was just terrible. You know, I left the house at 17 for college, then I found work and began living alone. Dad only had Mom as his friend. Losing her would be the most terrible thing he could go through. That is when our relationship was restored. I used to take my children to play with him and started paying regular visits to him. He finally left his company and handed it to a trust to run. My wife, never hung around my parents. I avoided visiting my mother while she was still living, claiming that she was overly intrusive in our life and that they did not get along. I started candidly berating my parents for being nasty and evil when my father declared he would take me off his will. She always intervened, claiming that it would damage our future, particularly our children's, so she stayed out of my connection with my parents. She was not ready to accept that our future, that of our children, was safe regardless of Dad's wealth. Now, considering the existing circumstances, I became agitated when she learned I would be accompanying Dad twice a week for dialysis. I tried first to explain to her that Dad only had me. Long ago he lost his parents. Although he has an elder brother, he lives on the opposite side of the city and hardly visits. Since Mom passed away, Dad has grown quite lonely. In this state, I cannot leave him. But my wife finds this difficult to grasp. She has lately made my life unpleasant. She comes up with some agenda every Saturday. Either deep cleaning, throwing a party at the house, outing the kids, or something as little as grocery shopping. She could schedule anything she wanted on Sundays, I said, since on Saturdays I have to pick Dad for dialysis. She then later chastises me for being late or missing them, yet she keeps with her plans. I have to dash to pick up my dad, drive him to the dialysis center, then drop him back home. I then get home to see Elle's sarcasm and outbursts. Not only on Saturdays? She also does the same on Wednesday evenings. Late in the evening or at night after dialysis, I had promised my supervisor that I would make up the missed work hours. Elle, though, always has a scheme to annoy me. She would leave the duty of our children to me almost every Wednesday night, meeting her relatives, catching up with long-lost friends, or going to some haphazard party. After a busy day at the dialysis center, I have to balance my work, prepare for the children, feed the smaller one and somehow finish my outstanding chores. My dad advised me several times to let him accompany the nurse to the center as he notices me always rushing and tensely staring at my watch. I drop him home and hardly wait a second before sprinting back. I ask him to be ready and wait outside before I come even when we are picking him up. Although Dad has a full-time nurse and caregiver to look after him, I still feel guilty about not spending time with him. His dwelling to the center takes 30 minutes of drive. I used to like talking to him during such drive in past times, remembering the better days. But with Aile's outbursts rising, all I can think about is running back home. To shorten the journey time, I most of the time am overspeeding my automobile in traffic, using shortcut lanes, and passing other cars. This is the only time I spend with Dad. Hence I don't want to damage or stop it by asking him to accompany the nurse. As a son, I too have some duties. Simply said, I cannot tolerate this woman anymore. Updated 1. It is simply growing worse daily. Not one stone is left unturned by my wife to discourage me from visiting my father. She makes the argument that it is a lost cause. Dad has already taken me out of his will and donated his riches to charity, hence there is no use in wasting time and effort for him. I am not sure I understand her. Do we act merely in line with profit and loss? What if someone's parents are impoverished or lack any fortune? Given little to contribute, do their children abandon them? I finally told her she wasn't going to inherit anything from her parents after listening to her outbursts for so many months. Why then does she visit her folks every now and then? She lost it at this, "Oh my God," then declared, "My parents accomplished a lot more than your selfish father. They helped me in many aspects. They are not like your father, who turned on you for not working for his company. You dare compare my parents to yours? My father would have never done that to me." This kind of confrontation happens virtually every Wednesday and Saturday when I get back from dialysis. It is not only a one-time occurrence at my house. With every incident, it gets more intense and ugly. She used to argue with me alone earlier, but right now I watch her screaming and yelling at me in front of the kids. Not only that, I have heard her disparaging my dad in front of our kids and using them against my dad. I intervened when I heard this, which resulted in still another nasty argument between us. For me, Aile's battles now become a ritual. I sense something is lacking on the days she doesn't fight, just for her to get more hostile the following day. Now I nearly gave up on her. I simply ignore her as though she doesn't exist. I don't yell back or answer her. Apart from what else ought I to do? I cannot give my father up to satisfy her. If he booted me out of his will, it makes no difference. He kicked me due of my own choice. I turned down his offer to work for his company, and he had to turn up his hard-earned company to a trust. It must have demoralized him rather severely. To my dad, that firm was like a baby. He had to donate it to someone else. Having offended him, he had every right to disown me. Sometimes I feel as though my hurting my dad is causing karma to bite me back. Dad, on the other hand, is growing frail. He requires assistance to step down to the automobile. He is hardly able to walk on his own. I used to ask him to drop him off outside the home so I could save time. But right now, I'm not bothered about being late. I enter to gently lead him to the car, then drop him off to rest soundly in his bed. He is also having dyspnea, so I walk him as slowly as he requires. I drive deliberately, avoiding overspeeds to maintain his heart rate steady. Getting home late now doesn't bother me. Rushing home was useless. If I have to deal with that awful woman, why not at least make Dad happy? My casual attitude has made things worse. Yesterday, Isle told me I had to decide between her dad or myself. Seeing his condition, it didn't seem like Dad had long left. I attempted to explain to her that Dad wasn't going to be with us forever. Her response was short. In that case, you need to make your choice carefully. Someone who is going to be with you forever or someone who is going to die soon. This was quite callous. You know what? I said to her. I pick my dad more wisely than you, who is so selfish and nasty to a dying man. She got ready and left her baggage. I also wanted some distance from her and she needed some time to calm off. I did not stop her. I am tending to the house, my kids, Dad, and my work while she is away. Still, I feel so calmed down and relieved. Actually, her absence helps me to relax. She sent divorce paperwork to me the day before yesterday. Though I was somewhat expecting it, I did not imagine it would happen so quickly. Though surprised, deep down I was glad and relieved. I merely signed the paperwork and returned them. I did not phone her. She obviously didn't want the kids, but surprisingly she didn't ask for custody of them. That was the one stipulation I worried about. She screamed back, "How could you just sign it without calling me and pleading with me?" When she got the documents. Funny, right? Her mother then grabbed the phone and yelled that I should have behaved like a man and attempted to calm my wife back into the marriage rather than merely signing the paperwork. It was funny. Why would I do that? I went along since she wanted a divorce. I could say, it was good for me, I got rid of her without a fuss. I also mocked her, pointing out she didn't want her children and even gave them up. She indicated I could have all my possessions, including my 2 children. She did not want any of it. Her mother also mentioned that Ail was still young and did not want children weighing on her shoulders. I answered, fine by me. Having my children around me makes me happy. Though it relieves me, I am concerned about my kids. They, especially the younger one, miss their mother. It's tough for me to handle all the obligations by myself when I'm at the office, but perhaps I'll be able to sail through this. Update 2. This will be a shorter update. I followed my kids to Dad's place. It's a fantastic idea, and I have to say, thanks to everyone for the amazing concept. It went exactly. All of us benefited from moving in with Dad. Dad brought my kids along, and they played with their grandfather. Why didn't Dad have a full-time caretaker ready to look after my kids for a payoff? The finest deal is someone to look after my kids under Dad's direction. Seeing Dad playing and laughing with my kids and them having fun with their grandfather makes me very happy. Isle saw not what was ahead. By divorcing me, she aimed to ruin my life. She believed I would not be able to manage all the obligations, looking after the kids, my dad, the house and business. But everything is just exactly as it should be. I am most sure laughing last. The divorce was the best thing ever, LOL. Update 3. The news is depressing. Dad died last week in sleep. After playing with my kids, he went to bed pleased and glad and never woke up again. The doctor said he passed away quietly. Dad was delighted after I moved in with him, according to the doctor, his nurse, and even his caregiver. This somewhat extended his lifetime. Before I moved in, he was already almost giving up. Losing your only parent is quite difficult, but I'm happy he could live the last few months of his life contentedly. Although my kids are quite depressed to lose him, Dad has taught them solid values. Grandpa used to urge them to embrace reality and go on. Life never pauses for anybody. Hearing such outstanding things from them makes me very proud. In this period of hopelessness, they are really my strength. One more startling news item, nevertheless, followed Dad's death. Dad's attorney got in touch with me and asked me to visit his office to unveil his intention. I responded it wasn't necessary. Dad had previously told me he had given all his fortune to the trust, so I was fine with that and advised the attorney he should move forward with the papers to transfer everything to them. Assuming it also applied to the charitable trust, I asked him whether I should leave Dad's house. Laughing at me, he instructed me to just drop over. The trust members were already present when I visited. The lawyer had also phoned them. I started crying when the attorney began to pursue the will. Actually, Dad had willed me as his heir. All his property, business and wealth was for me. Thinking he might have done it after I started looking after him, I questioned the lawyer whether this was done recently. The attorney grinned and stated the will was never changed. I was always his heir. I was in tears. My dad never left me. Perhaps he threatened to disown me so I might honor his business and heritage. Dad's attorney calmed me, but I was still crying. I stated it kills me inside since I hurt my dad all his life, but he always cared for me. The attorney claimed that Dad was really quite happy that I was ready to sacrifice family riches in order to follow my passion under his influence. Dad gave me much pride. The attorney indicated that for now I am the business's decision maker and that, should I so wish, I could remove the company from the trust and operate it myself. I could be doing that. I pursued whatever I wanted to accomplish and Dad subtly encouraged me. It is now my time to reimburse him. I'm considering reversing it from the trust and scaling it to the level Dad envisioned for his company to reach. Telling my kids about their grandfather's will when I got home, to be received once my children become 18, he has also bequeathed some of his fortune to them. We visited his tomb today bearing some flowers and rested in peace for some time. For me, this is a somewhat emotional stage. Update 4. You know how quickly ants swarm when they spot sugar candy? I started running Dad's company and other community service projects 1 month following his death. I first resigned from my employment and assumed running of the company. Then, since my kids and I elected to reside at my parents' place, I leased my house. I also desire not to leave this house since it preserves my childhood memories and they feel linked to their grandpa here. I received numerous guests at my house, long-lost relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors, after learning I had inherited the $1 million fortune of my father. Still, my ex-wife Al and her parents were the most unexpected guests. Sobbing, they came inside the house claiming they would have gone to the funeral but they didn't know about my father's death. Her parents then praised my dad in all the right ways. Al kissed the kids and wept over how much she missed them. If she missed them so much, I asked her, why did she not visit them during the past 7 or 8 months? She claimed to have gone to our house but found it locked. What a deception it is. I asked, weren't you concerned for your kids upon learning the house was locked? Did you not think it essential to get in touch and see whether the children were all right? She gave no response. Let us forget whatever has happened in the past, her parents urged next. The kids will be left by themselves in the house when I'm at work now that my father is dead. It would be better if we reconciled since they need a mother. At this advice, I laughed in their faces. When she left her children to me, they most needed her. The kids have become used to her absence now, hence I do not want her back into my life. She began to weep. Her parents left us by ourselves. She begged for reconciliation while holding my hands. She missed seeing the kids and claimed she loved me. Laughing I said, you know what, you cherish the fortune my dad left behind, not me. Here at my door you and your avaricious parents are here to drain off my money. Using those words for her parents is what they are, thus I have no regrets about it. During our divorce, she also called my dad unpleasant and avaricious. I could not have let this woman get 1 penny of my dad's hard-earned money. She became offended when I denigrated her parents. She stated till now she was begging me as she loved me, but now she would take what was rightly hers. She didn't ask for any alimony during the divorce, but now she wants half of my dad's fortune, rather, half of my wealth. She could do whatever she wanted, I told her. I'll destroy her but not pay her a penny. She fled after mistreating me. I explored this with my attorney regarding the potential. Her prospects were, he said, few. A year before I inherited anything, the divorce was settled. She couldn't get anything anyway since the kids were with me. He cautioned me though, about having her spend time with the kids. She might control them. File for their custody, then later on demand money for their upkeep and all that. I would like to thank him most especially for this counsel. I will oversee their meetings. These days, I also spend a lot of time with the children helping them to deal with the loss so they won't rush to their mother for emotional support. Having taken over my dad's business allows me great freedom to balance my personal life and well-being. The kids and I are going to have a Bahamas holiday. Really, why not? They are due this extravagant trip. No, it has nothing to do with overspending dad's fortune. I could have gone too, but I had to balance my job and dad's care earlier and lacked the time. I wanted to take them out now that I could. Regarding Isle, she hasn't got in touch with me since her most recent trip. She is probably busy suing me from every lawyer's office, knocking on every one of them. My stepbrother insisted that I leave the house during my stepfather's burial, believing it was his. Until the will revealed otherwise. 38-year-old Jake never imagined I would be getting ready for the burial of my stepfather. Memories sweep back like a tidal wave as I sit here organizing old pictures and planning. Death seems to cause one to consider a lifetime of events, both positive and negative. At 9 years old, my mother Sarah married Richard, my stepfather. The wedding day seems to me like yesterday. Mom looked lovely in her basic white outfit, hope beaming in her eyes for a fresh start. Richard, on the other hand, seemed to be stressing his austere attitude by wearing a black suit. Even on what ought to have been a happy occasion, he insisted on a solemn demeanor that I would come to know all too well over the years. Richard was a rigid man right from the beginning. Particularly when he turned to face me, he always seemed to be permanently frowning. Often I questioned whether he simply had the means to relate to a child who wasn't his own or if he harbored resentment at having to assume the position of stepfather. Growing up with Richard was not easy. From my grades to my wardrobe to even how I handled my fork at meals, he attacked everything I did. "You need to work harder, or this cruel world will chew you up and spit you out," he said almost daily. Looking back, I wonder if Dad was attempting to equip me for life in his own flawed manner. Even if at the time I believed he was just being nasty. His rigidity permeated every sphere of our life. I had to sit up straight, use the proper fork, and only spoke when spoken to during family get-togethers. Any departure from his expectations was greeted with a stinging stare or a harsh correction. Family vacations, which ought to have been light-hearted and leisureful, were more like military drills than pleasure excursions. Richard would schedule everything down to the last minute, heaven help us should we stray from the plan. One vacation I recall we missed a turn and arrived at a museum 15 minutes late. For the rest of the day Richard was in a terrible mood, grumbling about lost time and inadequate preparation. Everything changed 3 years following the wedding when my stepbrother Michael was born. Richard suddenly had his own son, and it was obviously clear whose favorite was. He poured love and compliments on Michael. Richard's smile was unlike anything I'd seen till he held his newborn kid. It revealed a part of Richard I never knew existed, like a switch had been turned on. I was envious and furious. When I was 12 years old, I couldn't comprehend why Michael received all the love and attention while I just got harsh looks and criticism. The difference was clear and agonizing. Michael's achievements, no matter little, were honored with great celebration. Even if they were notable, my own successes were greeted with a nod and a remark on how I can improve next time. Mom would try to reassure me when I protested to her about the unfair treatment. "Richard loves you too, Jake," she would say, her eyes begging me to understand. "That's just rough love. He wants you ready for the world." Still, it didn't feel like love to me. It seemed like continual disappointment as Richard saw me always failing. Our family dynamic changed in ways I never would have predicted throughout the years. Mom became ill at 25, and we all gathered around her. Richard stayed stoic even then, but I sensed compassion when he felt nobody else was looking. When Mom thought I wasn't in the room, I would observe him softly changing her pillows or crutching her hand. It was the first time I understood that Richard's lack of affection could have been more a result of his personal constraints than of his sentiments for us. 2 years later Mom passed away, and it felt as though the glue keeping our family intact had broken. Tears and quiet prayers defined the funeral. Richard stood like a monument all through the service, his face a blank mask. Though the wall between us seemed insurmountable, I wanted to get in touch with him to express our loss. Then 21 Michael left soon after Mom passed away. He launched his own family after tying the knot with Emma, his high school sweetheart. It was only me and Richard in that large mansion loaded with memories suddenly. I gave moving out some thought as well, but something held me back. Perhaps it was a feeling of obligation, or perhaps deep down I was still that small boy yearning some indication of approval from the guy who had been my father figure for most of my life. Looking after Richard in his latter years was difficult. Fighting the restrictions his aging body placed on him, he was as tenacious and critical as always. There were days when our conflict was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But occasionally too I felt short sparks of thanks in his eyes. Like the time I stayed up all night with him during a sick attack, or when I learnt to make his preferred foods as he grew too frail to stand at the stove himself. Those were uncommon events though, and most of the time I felt as though I was looking after a stranger who happened to live in my house. We were living in a tense truce, neither of us entirely sure how to close the distance that had widened between us over years. Richard's character made me never even consider entering a relationship or getting married. I wanted none of the same issues I was experiencing from my wife or girlfriend to confront. Richard's gone at 65, taken unexpectedly in the evening from a heart attack. Everyone is showing their respect as I get ready for his burial. Michael arrived with Emma and their children, Lily 5 years old and Max 3 years old. I hadn't seen him in years until now. Though he seems older and more austere, I recall from our early years that he exudes entitlement about everything. The funeral was a depressing event. I stood there listening to people talk about Richard, a fantastic man who always placed family first, a pillar of the community, and I wanted to find fun in the irony of it all. Knowing the same man I did they? To me, the Richard they described seemed to be a stranger. Michael drew me aside as folks were departing once it was all over. I considered that perhaps he wished to assist each other in our sadness, to reconnect, or to share memories of our childhood. Rather, he delivered a startling blow that left me whirling. "So, about the house," he said. His voice laid back as though we were talking about the temperature. "I'll need you to leave by the end of the month." "Not sure," I glanced at him. "What are you talking about?" He groaned and cast an intentionally obtuse glance at me. "Clearly, the house. Dad turned it over to me. Ultimately, I am his genuine son. You never imagined he would leave it to you?" I thought of myself as having been gutly pounded. This was how it turned out, all these years of trying to be the son Richard wanted and of looking after him. Part of me wanted to fight for what I felt I had earned over years of conscientious living. But another side of me, the one still feeling like that 9-year-old lad yearning for affirmation, wanted to withdraw. "Fine," I answered, my voice empty. "I'll be out by the end of the month." Not only for Richard, but for the family I never really had, for the bond I had always hoped would grow between Richard and me but never did, as I watched Michael walk away arm around Emma, kids running ahead. That evening I began packing among boxes of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to save. Sorting through years of accumulated belongings, I couldn't help but wonder whether Richard had been right all along. Sometimes you still ended up with nothing to show for it. The world was harsh. Update: I sold out of my childhood house a week ago. For now, Mom's sister Linda is here with me trying to decide what to do next. Thinking about Michael and how we got here, I lie awake at night staring at the foreign ceiling. Michael obviously was the preferred child growing up. Richard doted on him in a way he never did with me from the time he was born. Birthday celebrations with all his friends invited, new toys just because, please smiles when he brought home a good report card, all things I had longed for but never received. I recall one birthday Michael was around 8 years old. Richard hired a whole arcade for his buddies and himself. At the time, I was 17 and couldn't help but contrast it with my own birthdays, which often featured a quiet meal and perhaps a small gift. But Michael aged and something changed. The sweet little lad who used to follow me about wanting to play developed into a depressed adolescent who appeared to hate everything and everyone. He started to treat me like I was invisible and spoke angrily back to our parents. It was like seeing a stranger seize my little brother's body. One specific occasion comes to mind when he was around 16. Richard asked us about his marks when we were having dinner. Richard asked us both this kind of inquiry all the time. It was a regular one. Michael burst this time though. He began screaming about how he despised living under Richard's control and how sick he felt of the pressure. He bolted from the house, slamming the door so fiercely a picture fell from the wall. Richard seemed to be sitting there, looking older and sadder than I had ever seen him. Instead of the angry man I had anticipated to pursue Michael and drag back. Michael's behavior just became worse as he grew older. He began courting a series of girls, each relationship ending hazily. Late nights, missing curfews, and shouting battles with Richard that rocked the home abound. I tried to keep out of it, but the continual stress would inevitably affect me. Michael laughed it off when Richard tried to discuss respect and duty. "You can't control me anymore," he would say, and Richard would get this expression, a mix of wrath and despair, that I had never seen before. Then arrived the day he turned up with Emma as his bride. Not even among us knew he was seeing someone seriously, let alone getting ready for marriage. Walking in with Emma, little more than a teenage herself, he said they had eloped. I shall never forget Richard's expression. For once, he was silent. Mom tried to calm things down and welcome Emma into the family, but the air was clearly charged. Richard seemed to be straining to keep his cool and to find the proper words to speak to his kid. Emma claimed she wanted to live free from family meddling, apart. Michael thus packed his luggage and left, simply as that. He pledged to visit and keep in touch, but those pledges soon dropped off the list. Weeks became months devoid of his communication. His calls were always quick and often tinged with conflict. I assumed definitely he would come back when Mom fell ill, but he did not. He asked her periodically how she was doing, but always had a reason for why he couldn't visit. Work was hectic, the kids were sick, the car was in the shop. Something was always there. Hoping it would be Michael, I recall sitting next Mom's hospital bed and seeing her eyes flash every time the phone rang. More usually than not, it wasn't. It was me who had to phone Mom to let her know she died. He sounded very offended, full of regret for not visiting more frequently. He claimed he would try to make it to the funeral, but ultimately he did not show up, just a flower arrangement delivered to the funeral house accompanied by a card offering his sympathies. Feeling his absence like a physical hurt, I stood at the burial wondering how we had become so far apart. And right now here we are. Not motivated by love or obligation, the prodigal son returns for what he can gain. Thinking about how he swooped in and grabbed the house, acting as though he had some right to do so when he had left us years earlier, makes me enraged. I consider all the evenings I spent seeing to Richard, all the doctor's visits I accompanied, all the meals I made, and all the expenses I paid. And for what? To be thrown aside just like I never really mattered at all. But my phone calls as I'm staggered in these terrible ideas. It is Mr. Thompson, Richard's attorney. Telling me he has to talk about something vital, he sounds serious and asks me to come back to the house tomorrow. Uncertain on what to believe. Part of me hopes there's a mistake and maybe I won't have to abandon my house after all. Knowing how let down I have been in the past, another side of me is terrified to hope. I wonder what tomorrow will hold as I hang up the phone. Whatever it is, I am clear one thing. This is not going to be easy. I toss and turn the remainder of the night, my head ablaze with possibilities. Something so crucial that Mr. Thompson had to see me personally. Richard left something for me after all. Is it conceivable? Alternatively, is this only another letdown in a long run of disappointments? Feeling like a stranger, I stood before my childhood house the next day. To my astonishment, Michael's car was also in the driveway already. Breathing deeply, I entered. The familiar creak of the front door sent a pulse through me. Sitting at the dining room table, Mr. Thompson had a stack of documents before him. There were Michael and Emma as well, clearly agitated. With his demeanor unreadable, the attorney motioned for me to sit down. Seated, well aware of the tension in the room. "Thank you all for coming," he said with a firm businesslike voice. "I know this is a tough period, but there are some crucial issues about Richard's will we should talk about." Michael slanted forward, a smug grin on his face. "Let's wrap this up. I would want to start right away as I have plans for this home." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, seeming uncomfortable. "We should really talk about that. Richard's will states that Jake has been left the house and in fact all of his possessions." The room went still for a time. I felt as though I couldn't breathe. Had I heard him precisely? After all these years of believing I was never good enough, Richard had left everything to me. The first to react was Michael. "What?" he yelled, leaping to his feet so fast his chair dropped backwards. "That's not possible. Real son of his father is me. He wouldn't hand everything to Jake." Mr. Thompson stayed cool under Michael's rage. "I'm rather worried it's rather obvious. Richard's will specifically says that Jake is to inherit all of his possessions, including the house, his savings, and his personal items." What I was hearing defied belief. It seemed illogical. Those years of criticism, of feeling as though I could never measure up, and now this. Michael was pacing now, his face flushed with rage. "This is nuts. When he composed this, he must have been insane. I'll dispute it. I'll bring this before court." Mr. Thompson gave a headshake. "That is not what I would counsel. Richard prepared this will rather carefully. He included a letter outlining his choice and had it attested and notarized. Challenging effectively would be quite difficult." Michael turned to face me, his eyes flaming with resentment. "You did this, did not you? You somehow twisted him against me." Still in disbelief personally, I raised my hands. "About any of this I knew nothing. I assumed he was forwarding everything to you." Before things could get much more heated, Mr. Thompson stepped in. "If I may, I think Richard's letter might help to clarify his choice." Pulling out an envelope, he started to read. To his sons, "Should you be reading this, I am gone. Though I hope I can clarify, I know your two may find my choice shocking. I have made lots of mistakes over my life. Among my largest was not treating both of my sons equally in terms of love. I expected too much from Jake, was too demanding, never showed enough affection. And I treated Michael too kindly. I never set appropriate limits or imparted any lessons of value. As I considered my life in my last years, I came to see something crucial. A real son is defined by behavior rather than blood. And in that sense, Jake behaved as a real son ought to. He stayed with me through trying circumstances and looked after me even when I didn't deserve it. All the traits I attempted to teach but failed to show myself, patience, kindness and responsibility, he exhibited. I am so leaving everything to him, not as a punishment to Michael but rather as a tribute to the kid who really embodied the ideals I cherish. I hope you both have the compassion to see and pardon the errors of an elderly guy." The room went still once Mr. Thompson closed his book. Tears came to me, a lifetime of feelings rising inside me. All those years I felt Richard didn't care, that he considered me a disappointment. But he had been observing, noting, valuing in his own unique sense. Michael froze momentarily, his face a mask of shock and rage. Then he silently seized Emma's hand, rushed out, slammed the door behind him. His automobile started up and ran out of the driveway. The last act of disobedience was a tire screech. Turning to me, Mr. Thompson wore a gentle grin. "I know this is a lot to absorb, Jake," he continued. "Richard expressed his preferences quite precisely. He wished for you a safe future free from financial concerns." I nodded, still not sure I understood exactly what had transpired. "Thank you," I managed to say. "I need some time to consider all this." Mr. Thompson stopped as he neatly folded his documents. "There is still one more item. Your stepfather left you a personal note as well. You read it in private?" he questioned. He gave me an envelope with my name written in Richard's recognizable handwriting on it. I took it knowing that within our words I had waited a lifetime to hear with shaky hands. I sat by myself in the quiet house flipping the envelope in my hands after Mr. Thompson departed. At last I plucked the will to open it and read. "Jake dear, though I know I've never been excellent at communicating my emotions, hopefully this letter will help to offset some of my faults. I'm glad of the man you have evolved into. Though I failed as a parent, I had a challenging upbringing and never taught appropriate affectionate behavior. I reasoned that the best way to equip you for life was to be rigorous and challenge you. I regret the suffering I caused you. Now I understand I was mistaken. Particularly in these last several years, your compassion and commitment have shown me what actual strength and integrity look like. You now more than ever reflect the guy I always dreamed you would be. I apologize for not telling you these things when I was living. With my last wishes and this letter, maybe, you will have some peace and protection. Remember yourself, son. You are deserving of all the joy available. Love, Richard." Tears came down my face as I closed the book. All those years of feeling inadequate, of thinking Richard didn't care, and now this was overpowering. Over the next days I battled to make sense of everything. Once a cause of stress and bad memories, the house felt different now. It belonged to me, in a deeper sense as much as legally. It was evidence of Richard's affection, sincere if spoken too late. Michael hasn't gotten in touch since he departed that day. Not sure whether he will. Though I know it will take time, part of me hopes we can reconcile someday. The pain is still raw, and our distance seems more than it did years ago. I have given family, the complexity of love and the numerous ways people show it a lot of thought. Though often harsh, Richard's love was sincere. It was flawed. In his own sense, he was working to equip me for life and build my resilience. Though I wish he could have discovered a softer approach, I now better understand him. Regarding inheritance, it goes beyond just money and real estate. One has responsibility. Richard trusted me to continue on his legacy and to live the ideals he loved. Although it's a difficult work, I'm resolved to meet expectations. I have chosen to create a scholarship fund in Richard's name from a portion of the bequest. It's for children from difficult situations so they may have the education and chances they might otherwise miss. Taking the teachings he imparted on me and paying them forward seems like the proper approach to honor his memory. I'm still trying to make sense of everything as I sit here now in the house that turned unexpectedly into mine. Fathers and sons have a complex relationship marked by frequently unsaid feelings and misunderstandings. Richard and I never had the relationship I wanted when he was alive, but his last act has given me an opportunity to better know him, to see the love always there, buried under the surface. I wish Dad had told me these things during his lifetime. We could have had talks, cleared the air, perhaps even created the relationship I so yearned for. But life does not always provide us tidy ends or flawless closure. Right now, I'm concentrating on respecting Richard's memory by practicing the ideals he sought to inculcate in me. Work hard, be conscientious, and most importantly, love those who matter. I'm glad to be carrying on a legacy. Looking ahead, I experience a range of emotions: sadness for what was lost, thankfulness for what I have, and hope for what is to come. Richard's unexpected legacy has given me a fresh perspective of family, love and forgiveness in addition to financial stability. Though I never expected it, this is a new chapter in my life and I am ready to face it, bearing with me the lessons of the past and hope for a better future. That might ultimately be the best inheritance of all. I found out my daughter is pregnant. Am I a bad mom for refusing to raise the soon-to-be-born child of my non-binary daughter? My daughter came to me at 16 and said she was non-binary, but only sometimes. Like, some days she would feel more male than female and some days she would feel like neither. She wanted me to ask her every day what day it was and then refer to her as that pronoun of the day. I told her that wasn't going to fly. Growing up I spent a lot of time on LJ, LiveJournal, during the Olban self and Zen self-sir self days. People who think this is new to this generation are fooling themselves. I told her that I would call her the pronoun she wanted and do my best to remember it day to day, but she was going to have to tell me what she wanted for that day. I wasn't going to play a daily guessing game. This went on for about a week or two until she finally seemed to grow tired or bored and just said I could call her her. Though she still identifies as non-binary. Fine. At least when it was going on she wanted she, he, or they. I'm sorry but I couldn't have done fox self/fox them with a straight face. So that's the pronoun story, and looking back where I think things started to go off the handle. Here's my real question. My daughter is now 18, pregnant, and seems to have lost her goddamn mind. Or I'm an asshole. You choose. This year has been a struggle. She wanted to take a break year before she goes to community college, but can't keep a job. Apparently, retail situations are too phobic against her non-binary state. My child looks/acts/dresses exactly as a young adult female BTW. When I ask how people are being phobic against her, she gets as prickly as a cactus, so I really don't know the details. She's been through 4 or 5 jobs this year, quit all of them. She won't consider call centers that aren't face-to-face because she doesn't like to talk on phones, and is apparently looking for a remote job without any luck. She's been unemployed since Thanksgiving. She quit her last job on Black Friday, in fact, and I was on the verge of laying down the law, telling her she either needs to go to school this upcoming semester full-time or get a full-time job or move out with her friends. But now she's come to me and she's 5 months pregnant. She's very angry at me, says it's my fault because I didn't put her on puberty-blocking hormones when she came to me 2 years ago. She believes I'm in fact trying to feminize her by getting her birth control. The pill. She's been throwing her prescription away. This is where I might be the asshole. I called her a little idiot. We don't use that sort of language in my house, and I never call people names, especially my own child, but at that moment I could just see red. The hormone thing is a non-issue IMO because this is the first time I ever heard of her wanting hormones. What was I supposed to do? Go back in time? As for birth control, it's also the first time I'm hearing anything about this. There are non-pill options that don't have estrogen. If that was her want, all she had to do was ask and I would have driven her to the doctor myself. Or she could have taken the car she has and done it. She has her own medical card even. Though to be fair, I don't know how she would have managed the copay without a job. I know for a fact her old high school gave out free condoms like candy because her friends were always giggling over flavored sample packs, and even blew a few of them up like balloons and left them around the house one time. She had all the birth control she could ever want and used none of it. It gets worse. We're way past the date of abortion. Again, I would have helped her if this had been her wish. We live in an abortion-protected state and can afford it. She's known she was pregnant for about 2 months and has come to think of her baby like a sibling. She expects me to raise it like it was mine. That this is my duty, in fact, because she says it is my refusal to accept her non-binary state that led to her being pregnant. So she was going to get a brother or sister and I was going to have another child. You can say my language grew, sterner to versions of get your head out of your ass, and congratulations mommy, you have some hard decisions to make, and I said I would absolutely not raise her baby for her. She also refused to say who the father was. Now that I've cooled down, I'm really hoping she has a secret boyfriend. She does have some friends who were born male, but now also don't identify that way. We didn't even get there as I lost my mind when she said she thinks of her own baby as a sibling and wants me to raise it like my own child. She's locked herself in her room loudly wailing, I feel like crap warmed over. She's been in there for 12 hours, and as she has an attached bathroom, probably won't be coming out until she gets hungry. Considering it's been half a day, I think she has snacks stored. I also don't know where to go from here. Being pregnant sucks and messes with your head, so I'd like to blame that and the fear she must be feeling, but I have the bad feeling I either raised a spoiled brat or someone with an emerging personality disorder. So I need to know from people who aren't emotionally involved, and maybe some people who are more in tune with this whole non-binary thing than I am. What do I do to help while also making her responsible for her own child? How can I help my daughter accept she must do basically the most feminine thing you can do, give birth and possibly breastfeed, while being sensitive that she's non-binary? Am I just a big asshole here? Typing all this out, it feels like my daughter is lost in a crazy town. I'm still not raising her baby, but at what point do I drag a legal adult to the hospital? Edit. You might disagree with my choices or wording, but I'm reporting people who call this bait. It's not. Edit 2. It's the middle of the night and she has decided to pack some of her clothes and stay with one of her friends. One who I suspect is the baby daddy. Before she left, she told me that she already called the police and let them know that she was leaving of her own free will and was not in danger. Like I was going to report an 18-year-old adult as a runaway or something. It was insulting. I told her she needs to work out details if she wants to adopt with the father, and she was welcome back home when she had a plan in place. It was short because I heard her on the way out. I think she just meant to leave without saying anything. Thank you for your kind comments and advice, Reddit. I'm going to sleep. Commenters agreed that OP's child wasn't thinking straight. Comment 1. I hate to say this, but I sincerely hope OP's daughter chooses to give up this baby for adoption, because she's a confused hot-ass mess. I don't blame OP for not wanting to step on the crazy train and raise this baby. Comment 2. Let's be honest, if OP says yes to raising this child as her own, it will be the first of several. Daughter won't take BC, so she will continue to have unprotected sex and get pregnant. She decided a couple years ago that she's NB, expected her mother to understand that and know everything about it, and is now rewriting history to blame her mom for her now being pregnant. My head is swimming, and she's not my daughter. There will be more babies. Comment 3. You are so NTA. I feel sympathy for your kid because they sound like they are so confused, maybe have body dysphoria and are now facing a life-altering situation with no way out. They must feel so trapped. So they turn on you. It's easier for them to yell at and blame you instead of accepting responsibility. They are looking for a way out. We all keep changing and growing, and your kid is so young they seem to not know who they are yet, and now they have to face looking after a baby when they know deep down they can't even really take care of themselves. But my God, the thing they did that was really stupid was chucking BC away. That is actually wild. Your kid needs to learn the difference between gender-enforced stereotypes and actual biology. With biology, it unfortunately doesn't matter what gender you are, the biology doesn't care, it still works the same. They need to learn that and differentiate. Like I said, NTAOP, what a shit situation. I hope it gets better. I really do. Comment 4, NTA. Your child is in fact a little idiot, with behavior that would be an absolute nightmare had you not been their parent. Also, birth control isn't a form of feminization, it's a form of responsibility when you're born in a body with a uterus and want to have sex that can result in pregnancy. OP's response, I wish I had those words when she hit me with that one. I sort of sputtered for a few minutes. Comment 5, oh man, this is a can of worms within itself. I wish I had better advice, but just, I feel for you in the position you're stuck in. The only thing I can think of is, referring to breastfeeding as chest feeding, might make your NB daughter accept it more. But there's a whole other level of things you need to get through first. First and foremost, therapy, ASAP for your kid. Because she needs to get her head sorted out. Assuming you will just take this kid and raise it for her is problematic to say the least. And she's got a deadline coming obviously, so therapy ASAP. Also appointment for pregnancy checkups ASAP. Has she had any? An unmonitored pregnancy can lead to complications. You might also be able to get her a social worker to go through pregnancy checkups, birthing extra. Your kid needs a big sit-down conversation about accountability for your own actions. And about how she might feel like part of your actions lead to this. There was also many choices she could have made to prevent this, that she chose not to. And at the end of the day, it was her choices that led to this, not you. OP's response, thanks for this tip. I've written it down. The reason I mentioned she was NB because using breast instead of chest is the exact type of thing to send her into a pissy fit when she's in the wrong mood. I know this may sound like a little thing, but she's always been, dramatic. Because it's the internet and things are anonymous, I'll admit that I am absolutely dreading pregnancy and afterbirth mood swings. Especially since it will all involve very womanly things in every intimate way. On top of the sheer stress of a newborn? Yes, I'm not looking forward to it at all and am already preparing to endure the storms. Our conversation wasn't productive, it was an argument and she's still not out of her room, but I don't think she has had any prenatal care. That will change if I have anything to do with it. Thanks again. OP commented with some of her concerns, yes. My worry and regret have so many places to go and a big part of it is for the baby. This has been a bad day. Responding to a comment regarding her child's entitled attitude, oh believe you me I have been kicking myself up and down on top of everything else. I don't know how she got to this point, but she's there now. I wish I did have that time travel machine she clearly expects me to have. She also clarified her overall views on the matter. I'm on the fence. If she acted at all like she didn't have a gender, I believe that's what NB is, then I could take it more seriously. But she dresses as a woman. She puts on makeup, wears dresses during the summer, enjoys feminine things. We watch horse videos on YouTube and squeal over the new foal videos. She's never been a tomboy, even. But I was like, okay, this isn't hurting her. I'll let her have this and express herself. Maybe it'll turn into something, maybe it won't. And after the first few weeks, she even dropped changing pronouns every day. Her mentioning being NB faded and then started up hard again when high school ended and she started working retail. I try to be understanding. Retail is hell and I'd personally only work it again if I was at my last resort, but recently it does seem to be an excuse not to work, and now she has a baby on the way. This may not be the place for it, but I'm just worried she's regressing to a more childlike state. I don't know if she's struggling with being NB or if she's using NB as an excuse to shield herself from the world. Ugh. I guess the internet won't know, but I'm just flat out worried. Update. This is an update to this post. Long story short, my 18-year-old NB daughter wanted me to raise her baby, and she told me she thinks of the baby as her sibling. We had a blowout. She locked herself in her room for most of a day and then took off with her friends, her lover. So this happened a few days ago, but I didn't update because I needed to get my head around it. It still doesn't make sense. Daughter finally unblocked me. She and the person who got her pregnant wanted to talk to me at a public place. We chose IHOP. Although I suspected I knew who her lover was, I was disappointed to find out because they have been a part of my daughter's friend group since high school and was the only one I ever had a problem with and kicked out of my house. They are trans now, but 2 years ago the friend group was watching a movie in the living room, and every time I'd pass by, he was a he then, would lock eyes with me and make really obnoxious, loud orgasm sounds like that scene in Harry Met Sally. I told him to knock it off and grew sterner when he did it again. Then when I was in the kitchen, he somehow snuck up behind me and was miming jack-off movements with his hand. I turned around and caught him at it. He was still fully clothed, but it was startling and freaky. I kicked him out. So now I'll just call them sperm donor because that's what they are. I'm still calling my daughter and she because I still haven't been told not to by her otherwise. So get off my case on that. Anyway, the IHOP meeting was a shit show. Sperm donor sat with my daughter and went on the attack. Sperm donor's points were, I was poisoning my daughter by making her take birth control. I only helped her get the prescription and would have done everything I could if I knew she didn't want to take the pill. There are other methods. It will take years to fix my daughter after all I did. Not giving her hormones even though I had no idea that was what she wanted. She dropped out, even wanting to change her pronouns after a few weeks. Abortion is a sin and I'm a monster for suggesting it. It's past the date anyway. I am further abusing her by not taking care of the baby while she fixes herself. I guess they meant it as a temp situation, which was also new to me. So apparently even though I'm an abusive monster, a bad mother and so on, I'm even worse for not taking in their baby. At least no one suggested that I raise it like my daughter's sister anymore. That might have been my daughter's thought on it. Sperm donor did most of the talking while my daughter just sat and glared at me, nodding along. It was kind of a whirlwind. Sperm donor pounded the table a few times, and even the waiter knew not to bother us after drinks, lol. I'm surprised we weren't asked to leave. There was a lot said, mostly by the sperm donor who really seemed to be steering the ship. I asked why the sperm donor couldn't take care of the baby and the sperm donor said their parents were even worse than me. I guess my daughter and sperm donor taking care of the child they created is out of the question. I told them that I would not be raising their baby for them and that adoption is the best bet. They said that if I don't agree to raise it, they'll make sure I'll never see the baby ever. I won't raise their child for them. So that's that, I guess. I feel so many flavors of worried and angry and then worried all over again. I've been around the block and it's never a great sign when the person you're with makes an enemy of your family. That's what sperm donor has done by painting me as an abuser and failed mother who also won't take in their baby. Sounds like sperm donors have cut themselves off from their own family too. So I'm worried my daughter is in a very controlling relationship with someone who convinced her to stop birth control because they think hormones are too feminizing somehow and that she needs to be fixed. But they still want me to raise their baby. I'm angry that my daughter can just hear this crap and nod along like, yeah, that makes total sense. She is not stupid. I think she's love blinded. I'm sad and worried for the baby. A couple commenters suggested I wanted nothing to do with the baby because I wouldn't agree to raise it as my own. No, in a perfect world, I would want a normal grandmotherly relationship. Or at least know that the child is safe and has been adopted into a loving family. I don't care what my daughter does with her gender, or her body as long as she doesn't hurt herself. I want her to be in a happy relationship with someone who values her for who she is. Sperm donor kept using the word fix, which I see as another terrible sign. It's bad all around. My house is empty. It feels like my adult daughter has run off to join up with some weird church cult thing who tells her that up is down. That not using birth control and not getting an abortion and then expecting others to take care of the child is all a-okay. Oh, and that she's a problem and needs to be fixed. I texted her and said I would be there for her, but sperm donors was still not welcome in the house. I think I'm blocked again. She's a legal adult. I'm not sure what else I can do at this point. In my low points, part of me thinks maybe I should agree to take the baby and then immediately make sure it's adopted into a loving home. But I get the feeling that sperm donors won't make that easy, and right now my daughter does what he says. Also, I'm not sure if that plan is even possible. It sounds like Hollywood. I have an appointment to speak with a counselor, but the soonest I could get is April. Some of my friends think I should take the baby in either to get them away from the parents or because they think it's my duty, or both. The only silver lining in this was that they both seem sober. I don't think there's drugs involved. Am I reading this wrong? Am I the asshole here? Commenters agreed that sperm donors' comments made no sense, and that OP's child was probably stuck in an abusive relationship. Comment 1. For your safety, I would change the locks and put up a camera. Sperm donor seems unhinged. I'm a firm believer in better safe than sorry. Comment 2. This baby will be used as a pawn in his never-ending psychodrama. If they do not and cannot raise their baby, the best solution is adoption. Otherwise, the father will make your life a living hell. OP's response. I couldn't figure out a polite way of saying this, but yes. That is my suspicion if I take in their baby. Sperm donor implied it would be temporary while earlier my daughter said it would be permanent. I think sperm donors will refuse to sign over paperwork when the time comes or try to leverage it in some way. Comment 3, NTA. Also, it sounds like your daughter is in an abusive relationship with this person. Sorry your daughter has been brainwashed by this crazy person. I would definitely contact this sperm donor's family and if they seem sane, warn them about how crazy both of them spoke to you. OP's response. That is my fear and not a bad idea to contact sperm donor's parents. This has all happened so far. I feel like I'm in shock and I'm very worried. Comment 4. Pretty wild that a trans person is saying abortion is a sin. None of this is anything like what you're going to hear from any healthy LGBT community, who are quite careful to make sure not to support people in delusional or antisocial behavior. Definitely get therapy. Sounds like your kid has some serious mental health problems if they're being influenced by whatever wackos put these ideas into their head. You're going to need support in coping with this madness. NTA by a country mile. You are in no way abusing your kid by refusing to take responsibility for their bad choices. OP's response. Thank you, and yes, I don't want to minimize my daughter's role in it, but the hard anti-abortion thing surprised me too. A lot of what they said contradicted itself. It felt like I was sitting across from two people who were in their own wacko bubble. I know it's not a LGBT thing. I wish someone from their community would knock some sense into them, if it's even possible at this point. OP left an update in a comment. I logged in and received a large amount of requests for an update. Unfortunately, I do not have one. I have not seen or heard from my daughter since the last meeting, and I believe she has changed her phone number. Our community isn't a large one, and I have heard through the grapevine she is staying with the sperm donor in one of the homeless camps out in the woods. As this is a haven for drugs and sex trafficking, this is a further concern. From what I've heard, she is pregnant. Myself and a few friends and family members have driven through the camp area a few times on the lookout for her, but it's very large and there aren't exactly marked roads. Also recently other people have been shot at while walking their dogs around there, or riding ATVs, so every time we go it's a risk. So that's it. I'm stuck hoping she's safe and under some kind of shelter. There are a lot of plywood houses and broken down RVs out there, and waiting to hear news when she has the baby. Yes, CPS and the local police are aware of my concerns. I'm worried the child will be born addicted to drugs because I don't know anyone who doesn't live out there who isn't a meth head. Thanks for your concern all. I'm unsure what I'll do when the baby is born. I might have to take in the baby after all just to make sure it doesn't live in that camp, and it may make me an asshole. But I am not looking forward to the hard work and drama that will come with it. New update. I posted another update in the comments a while back. It's on my account. Basically my pregnant daughter shut me out of her life completely and rumor had it she was living in a homeless camp with her weirdo lover out in the woods. It's a huge place and my friends and I searched a few times but weren't able to find her. It's also dangerous because there aren't laws out there and the homeless shoot at ATV riders and hikers and send dogs after people who come too close to what they consider their territory. To be clear, I don't think my daughter was part of that group. The camp is huge and full of meth addicts, sex traffickers, and drug labs. Anyway, the full story is in my account if you care. I did contact sperm donor's parents and they have all but disowned him after very much the same disturbing behavior I outlined earlier, only geared toward their younger siblings. So that sucks. Back to the new news. All this shook out a couple weeks ago, but I hesitated to post because of my own emotions and the fact I know Reddit will be all over my ass for the deep anger, shame, and disappointment I have for my daughter. I came home from grocery shopping to find a strange pregnant woman at my door. That woman used to be my daughter, but had changed so much she was like a stranger. She chatters constantly so you can't get a word in, she has several small face tattoos and, forgive me for saying this, looks like she has aged 20 years. She had been living rough. She was angry I locked her out. I changed the locks after she left, and basically expected to move back into her old room with no problem, like it was just another day from back in the winter when she lived here. Of course I wasn't going to turn her away, so I guess in a way she was right. She was living in the homeless camp with the sperm donor, and I insisted she take a shower because it looked like she hadn't since leaving. She also stank bad. She had no shame about blocking my number or what she put me through by disappearing. All she wanted to talk about was the grand fate that she and sperm donor are building. That they're building a community of new people, and she went on and on and on without mentioning the baby once. I don't know how anyone can stand them, but sperm donor has multiple partners and my daughter is one of them and is perfectly happy being his broodmare. The broodmare is my verbiage. Hers is much more royal. Frankly, based on what she overshared, sperm donor seems like a complete sex fiend. Finally I broke in and asked and she said she had been to the doctor regularly. That was a lie, found out later. And all is well with the baby. At this point I knew she had to be on drugs. If she was awake, she was talking, and none of what she said had an end or a point. Also, a lot was from Crazy Town. What I got from her was that, again, she and several other ladies, and men, somehow, were to carry the next generation of new people. Yes, the men. Yes, biological men. Sperm donor was sort of the middle of the wheel with the spokes, was how she described it. I've met him before and I'm surprised he was able to get one girlfriend, much less whatever grouping is going on now. Anyway, sometimes she said she wanted to keep the baby, though she wouldn't tell me a plan to take care of and house it. I think she expected to stay with me, and sometimes she wanted to adopt it out, but not for the good of the baby but to spread the new people. This part is going to upset the internet, but the new people are apparently without gender expectations and that was why she didn't know the baby's gender yet. Oh yeah, and also some of the wheel, her group, were empathic and they could communicate their feelings through the other world. As a houseguest, she was the absolute worst. It was like she had gone feral out in the camp and cleaned up after herself to the point where she mostly did not even flush the toilet after using it. She ate everything, which was to be expected, but never cleaned up after herself and kept asking is too mild of a word, she demanded, for me to take her out to restaurants. I did it a couple of times because I missed her and was trying to make a connection, but then once afterward took her to the store to get baby supplies, and she was weirdly detached. Sort of picked up the first thing she saw on the shelf and all the while it was yak about her true family of new people and their grand fate. Anyway, I finally told her that she expected the baby in mid-July, which put her outside the time frame she originally gave me. I had it on my calendar. I was obsessed with the possible due date because I didn't know if she would find a baby on my doorstep or what. And yes, she was under the care of a doctor. Both lies. Getting her to focus on one subject was impossible. She would only stop talking long enough to take a breath and only listen long enough to you to stop for your own before she'd launch into a new thing, usually around sperm donor, who she loved but was nowhere in sight and was chilling back at the camp with the rest of his breeding stock, or whatever. Basically I was waiting for her to come down off whatever high she was on, when she went into full-blown labor. It was a complete shit show. She was having pains but her water hadn't broken yet. At the hospital it came out that she had not been to the doctor once for the baby. There are programs in our state that cover pregnancies. So that put her at high risk, so she was admitted immediately. That's when the switch flipped and she became hateful towards nurses and doctors. She said the worst things and they were absolute saints in return. She also had delusions of grandeur and told them she was their queen and accused them of trying to punish her. It was so wild, I can't even describe the monster she became. So hateful. Racist, vicious, and the worst things you can say to people, she said them. She wasn't in hard labor yet, so it wasn't entirely the pain. I pulled one nurse aside and told her where she had been living and that I suspected drugs, though I hadn't caught her using yet. They were so professional and gave her painkillers that helped her mood. Not gonna lie, they doped her up because she was acting wild. Imagine my surprise when her blood work came out clean. I wasn't there for the birth because she didn't want me in the room with her, and heaven help me, I was a little relieved because I was ashamed of her behavior. but I did talk to a social worker on staff to let them know everything I did. The lady was very nice but couldn't speculate officially on my daughter's mental state. I said she had to be bipolar or manic or something because her behavior was not normal, but she asked if she had threatened to kill herself or harm the baby and she hadn't. They can't step in until there's a threat. Miraculously, the child was born at a good weight and healthy, and not addicted. I don't want to give too much info on them because the internet is forever and one day they may search for their own past. My daughter lucked out big time and had a normal delivery as things went. She didn't give sperm donor's name out as the father, though I did to the social worker. They can't put the birth certificate on my word. She got up and left her baby that evening without officially checking out. Without saying goodbye to me or her newborn. Because the hospital is a safe surrender point, she won't be charged for abandonment. CPS asked if I wanted to take the child and though it tore me up, I said no. There are a lot of reasons for why. A big one is I don't want to be held hostage to my daughter's whims, and especially sperm donor. I don't want to be on the hook for more children who are likely to come. Also look at my daughter. I did my best and she still turned out this way. Maybe I shouldn't try again. I know getting a new family is almost the best thing that could have happened for the baby even with problems with the foster system. It has to be better than the camp. But I feel like dog shit about it even now. I also suspect they'll have a sibling soon as my daughter can arrange it. I know my daughter is not well. I know she's in a cult and probably in danger and also probably an abuser herself, based on the stories she casually dropped about other members. She is also a selfish liar and it is luck or the grace of God or what have you that her baby was born healthy. She is rolling the dice on her life and the life of her future children. She's sick and under a sex fiend's control and now thinks she has magic thought powers, but she has some responsibility in this too. All the rest of the transgender stuff with her lover, and if she is NB or not from the past doesn't matter. She's an adult and is making some bad choices. It's hard for me to type out, but the way she treated the hospital staff was so cruel. Seriously, I had to use a thesaurus to describe it because I can't even fully describe how bad it was. It showed me that whatever else, she thinks other people are below her. It's more than the mania. I'm just there to serve her, whenever she sees fit. She knew she would be giving birth soon, so she came home and expected me to take care of her. I did, of course, because she was 9 months pregnant. And the second she didn't have any more need for me, or the baby she had just given birth to, it was easy to take off again. I listened to her for days and she expressed no feelings of hope for the baby other than a vehicle to spread their movement. No worry about their future life, and no more comments on me raising them as a sibling. She made the choice to leave and go back to sperm donor's harem or wheel or whatever. Sick or not, I'm ashamed to have raised someone with these kinds of values. Mentally ill people aren't bad people, but she has gone beyond merely bad choices. I haven't totally written her off and she may come back to sanity, but since all indications are that I'm blocked again, I'm going to think long and hard about boundaries and possibly moving. I'm worried about one day finding a bunch of curtly weirdos on my porch. So that's it, I don't know what to do. It's not like I have the resources to pay someone to deprogram my daughter, and that sounds very Hollywood. I need a realistic goal. It's more than just a cult. She needs a checkup from the neck up and I don't have the legal standing to do anything. At least the baby is safe. That's the one bright spot. Thoughts are welcome and, forgive me, any realistic suggestions, or just tell me if I'm way off base and I'm the asshole here. This has been a hell of a year and such a spiral. A year ago I had a somewhat of a slacker teenager under my roof. Now all of this. My parents favored my younger brother over me. They even chose to attend his game instead of coming to my wedding. Buckle up guys, this will be kinda long. So I, 27, have a younger brother, Mike, 21. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him. Just overall, an asshole. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs, or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just, born. And my parents completely discarded me. My mom, 5, especially. She went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, 50, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood for me was my grandpa, 76, who always called my parents out on their bullshit, and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him, and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent is his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that money was given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It's at a public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to there. Of course I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now, to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything, and when I told my parents they dismissed it with a "that's nice." I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. And whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point I got fed up with it and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize, whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend, because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day, and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballets, shows and both my high school and university graduation for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely omitted the fact that this event was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas's family and our friends were all there and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said they had my brother's game to attend, and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon, and were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a shitstorm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on, and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook, and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears. And this seemed to be my father's breaking point, because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval, that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening at home. Can't blame any of my relatives, they all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state. But my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding, because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on three fronts. The majority who are sticking by my side, my maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. TLDR, since some of you guys want the juice without reading the post. My parents have preferred my younger brother over me my entire life, and prioritized his events over mine. I got engaged and told everyone, but was dismissed. I sent a wedding invitation to my parents and double-checked, but they didn't respond. When I told them the date, they told me my brother had a game they had to attend. I didn't repeat that it was my wedding during the exchange and told them that they weren't missing anything. I had my wedding and now my parents are receiving backlash from my relatives and community after my aunt posted a dig at my mother. Edit. Thank you so much for the feedback and love. It's overwhelming. I'm going to address the popular questions here. I did inform my parents about my wedding. I sent traditional on-paper invites to all my guests, and was notified that all invites had reached their addressees. I did not receive any answer from my parents and Mike, a few very distant relatives, and some people on Lucas's side. I did reach out to all of them through a message to double check, and those who hadn't replied told me they couldn't come. I asked my parents and brother via text, but they didn't respond. I was left to read. Knowing them and given all the things I had to plan, I didn't bother insisting. I didn't repeat the date of my wedding because I had already been told there was my brother's game. Plus, every time I insisted on highlighting my celebrations to get an answer, I was always told that it wasn't that important and to not be pissy and a bother. Because some things were simply more important than me. At this point I think it's fair for me to not insist anymore. It's not worth the effort. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I avoided telling my parents that it was my wedding to see if they would be interested in the slightest, but surprise surprise, they weren't. Despite this, I did openly talk about my wedding with my aunts and uncles. My mother was in the room with us a few times when I discussed venues or dress shops with my aunt, the FB post one. But sometimes mom was on the phone, and other times she was just chatting with other people. She never paid attention. When I talked about it during reunions, she smiled and said, "That's great, dear," and then would change the subject. Radio silence on Dad and Mike. I kept in contact with them because, well, all the times I tried to go NC in the past years I've been harassed. I tried after my HS, bachelor's and master's graduations, to which they never bothered to show up for reasons involving my brother. Every time I was shamed for daring to turn my back on family by my parents, my brother, my maternal aunts and my maternal grandparents. I think the turning point here is that, all those times, Lucas wasn't by my side. We started dating a little after my last attempt at going NC, and now that I have him here, I feel more confident in my stance. But before that, I want this confidence. As I already stated, all my paternal side lives on the other side of the country and wasn't aware of how they treated me. I did try to expose my parents once, at 14. My aunts, uncles and grandpa reprimanded them, they faked being sorry, and then once home I got the beating and gaslighting of my life for lying. After that, L kept in contact regularly with my paternal side, but omitting my parents' abuse out of fear, which still haunts me to this day. Only grandpa knew, but he was always threatened to be alienated from me if he tried anything. My parents and I are not from the same city. I live in a city an hour drive from my parents' small town, and they don't know my new address because once, my brother tried to break into my apartment to steal some cash and my mother backed him up, claiming that siblings share their goods. Now I moved, and I'll be sure not to tell them where I live. My parents didn't buy my brother a car and a house before he even started high school. They bought him a car for his 16th birthday, and a house near his college when he began freshman year. They didn't spend the money from my fund right away, they just lied to me to use it later for my brother, keeping it stored for later in the meantime. Relevant comments. Commenter, do you think it would have been different if they knew it was a wedding and not just an event? OP, well, I am pretty certain my parents would have been a handful at my wedding anyway. They ruined a cousin's wedding by making it all about how my brother had just given his first university exam, and he got drunk and trashed part of the cake. So, I'm wondering what made me want to add them to the guest list in the first place, but then again in my family going NC or even LC is considered shameful. The cousin whose wedding Mike trashed cut my family off, and they've been dragged for turning their back on family over a minor accident. OP on her father missing her wedding and why it was a big deal for him. OP. Giving daughters away is a big deal on my father's side of the family. He only has me, and has made a big deal since birth despite how he treated me. Appearances, that's what matters? Make of this whatever you wish to make it. Update. First of all, I want to thank all those who were interested in my story, and those who wished me and my husband a happy life. I am beyond grateful for your reassuring messages, and your love and feedback. The response was overwhelming and beyond what I ever thought it could be. I love you all so much. To those who believed my story was fake, I want to say that I'm happy your family life is better than mine, to the point of thinking of my reality as a fantasy, but I'd appreciate it if you stopped harassing me in DM, claiming that I'm writing a fake story for attention. If I've missed a few details in the OG post, it's because I was overwhelmed and crying my eyes out because of my family's harassment. You are not forced to read my story, or think it's true, but I think keeping the smallest amount of decency would be nice. Oh, and before diving in the update, let me clarify a few things. Yes, the invitation specifically stated it was a wedding. No excuses. My maternal side of the family didn't come to the wedding. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear in the OG post. Most of them were busy, and the others just gave me excuses to send a gift but did not come. That's it. Don't ask me why they didn't discuss my wedding with my mom, it's not like I live in their brain. My mother's atonement is the fact that she apologized via text. Now on to the update, things have been a little crazy this past week. I got off of Reddit for a couple of days, to gather my thoughts. Then I had a lengthy conversation with Lucas about how to proceed. He's been my rock, and I don't think I could ever love him more than I already do. My parents were always a taboo topic, but he hit me with a brutal reality check that I absolutely needed. We reached the conclusion that the fact I kept in contact all this time, stuck around and couldn't go NC, isn't healthy. I've realized that, the reason I never fully went NC, was that deep down I just wanted their approval, even now, for once. Pathetic, I know. But it's like a drug, being with my parents. They can be loving, funny, caring and warm, until they're not. The little love they give makes you crave for more, and you want their approval so badly you destroy yourself. But that's enough. I promised myself that things are going to change. I've thought about it and decided to start therapy, and to go NC with all those who made an issue about this situation, for good this time. After the days dedicated to reflecting on how I feel, I ended up messaging my father to tell him that, if he wanted to talk, I would meet him, Mom and Mike in a neutral location the following day. He immediately replied and agreed, and we met at the park. My father's sisters and brother accompanied us for damage control. My father looked distraught and as if he had been crying for a while. My mom looked the same, but I think it was more out of anger and embarrassment. My brother looked annoyed. I told the three of them about how their behavior and preference in regards of my brother always hurt me, and that their abusive behavior made me realize that I didn't want contact with any of them again after that meeting. My mother tried to cut me off multiple times, but my aunt, the one who posted on FB, shut her up every single time. When I asked them why they would treat me this way, they didn't know what to say. My father kept crying and apologizing without giving me an answer, and my uncle reprimanded him for it. My mother seemed as if she was asking herself that for the first time, but well, in the end she just said that she simply disliked me. Plain and simple. And my brother? He just liked the attention and made me miserable as some kind of sport. I went on with my questions. When I asked why they never responded to my invite, they claimed to have never received one. I showed them the texts, but they denied receiving them. And well, it turns out that they hadn't in fact received my wedding invitation. When it arrived at their house, they weren't there. The only one in the house was my brother, who had come visiting for the weekend. He saw the invite and, as many of you guessed, ripped it up and trashed it. And then, when I texted my parents, he deleted the messages. Wasn't hard to do. According to him, they kept my chat archived and didn't get the notification. So my parents never actually got a formal invitation. I was just distraught. I asked Mike why he would do that, and he just shrugged, and claimed that it wasn't as important as the stuff they had in the program anyway. I had to stop Lucas from punching him in the face. Strangely enough, my parents were upset and started reprimanding him. He actually began to throw a tantrum and cry crocodile tears, and I must admit that I was kind of satisfied. But then my mom claimed that all was resolved, there was no need to fuss over a misunderstanding, and it was time for me to clear their name. That set me off, and I interrupted her, telling her that they weren't forgiven at all, that just because Mike trashed the invite, it didn't mean it automatically canceled all their neglect out. Plus, all that time it was still very obvious that I was having a wedding, and they should have asked about it. You want to know my mother's response? She said something along the lines of, "I did hear you talking about a wedding of yours, but I just thought you were being delusional." And seeking my attention with exaggerated scenarios. She was convinced Lucas didn't actually like me, nor would ever marry me. When I tell you I was about to trash her face, do you believe me? Another thing came up. It turns out that my brother didn't have a football game to go to at all. My parents used the fact that my husband, friends and I know little to nothing about football, we prefer soccer. And the fact I stopped asking about it when Mike would mock me during his time in high school, to make up a story to avoid my event. At the time I wrote the OG post, I couldn't confirm or deny the presence of a game because my brother has private social media and Lucas and I are blocked, and I foolishly trusted my parents' word. But no. You want to know where they went with that man-child? They went to Disneyland, because Mike wanted to go. They used the football story to cover for my brother's 100th tantrum holiday, and apparently they did it multiple times in the past months. At that point I was just completely burnt out and overwhelmed by this amount of information. The fact that I had been fooled this badly, that I was so gullible, genuinely made my blood boil, and I snapped. I stood up and told my father he was a sad, weak man, unable to stand up for his kids unless his wife approved of it. I told my brother he was a little dipshit, a poor excuse of a man that will not accomplish anything in his life and that he'll always live like the leech he is, baby to the point of uselessness. And to my mom, I told her that she was the worst narcissist, pathetic, little woman on the earth, that she didn't even deserve to be addressed and judged, for her irrelevance. That not even God could help her out because she is just too rotten. Harsh, I know. My mother shot up from her seat to scream at me halfway through my rant to her, but I was just too mad. I shouted at her to shut the fuck up and sit down, and listen for once. She got so mad it felt like steam was coming out of her ears. I don't remember much after that, just that I kept talking. And talking. It felt as if all my anger and hurt just flooded out. At one point I'm pretty sure the whole park was silent. I spat at my parents and Mike that I was disowning them all, and that if they're smart, they'll think before reaching out again. I took my purse and left with Lucas, Anna and Francis, leaving my parents and brother at my aunt's and uncle's mercy. I think at some point the reality of what I had just learned and said finally hit me, because I ended up having a panic attack on the way home. Lucas was driving, so Anna helped me through it until we stopped in a parking lot to calm me down. I am beyond grateful for their help. Once home I just fell on the bed and went to sleep. I really wanted to go with you guys' advice, and post the whole thread on FB, but given my work and career I couldn't expose myself like that. One thing is sharing my story from an anonymous throwaway on Reddit, the other is on FB, with my name and face plastered everywhere. I couldn't go down that path. Instead, I did something better. I made a folder with all of my mother's insults, messages and awful comments, and sent it to the woman in charge of my mom's church. It's a tight-knit community my mom worked her ass off to enter in, but that is also extremely judgmental, and being shunned by them is a death sentence. And well, that's exactly what happened. Just like clockwork, the scandal spread like wildfire, going out of the church and reaching the rest of the small town. You can imagine what this means for my mother and father. Because of my little spill, I did find other messages from my maternal side of the family, belittling me even more for upsetting their sister or daughter and insulting her. I just didn't care anymore at that point, so I followed you guys' advice, and told them that from now on, they will no longer be part of my life and that they can talk shit all they want, I just won't care. Instead, they should be grateful I don't send their nasty texts to their employers and spouses. I blocked every single one of them, grandparents included, on everything. I did find a lengthy message from my father. He apologized for not being strong enough to face my mother, agreed that what I said was true and couldn't believe that he had lost so much of my life because of her. He told me he is going to divorce her no matter what my decision will be, because he is tired of being controlled. He would like a relationship with me to make up for all the years that passed. I did reply to him, to tell him that as of now I really don't want to see him or forgive him. He has replied that he'll try his best to win me back, and that he loves me. I replied back that, as of now, I find that hard to believe, and then blocked him too. Frankly, his slimy way of trying to get out of this situation by throwing my mother under the bus is pathetic. At least, she was hateful and owned up to it. He is only able to blame others for his choices. I don't want to surround myself with people like that. My mother and brother are blocked similarly to my maternal side. Mike wrote other messages to taunt and insult me, and I just blocked him. My mom threw herself a pity party for being shunned by her community and for her marriage going into shambles, and I just replied, good riddance, before blocking her too. As for my grandpa, he has decided to stay with us for a while, to stick by my side. He really is the best, and has read some of your comments. He isn't going to admit that he's flattered by them. Since then a few days have passed, and all has been quiet. Lucas is spoiling me rotten, and I'm starting therapy soon. I know this isn't the drama-filled, revengeful update you hoped for, but well, this is it. I'll let you know if anything changes or evolves. Thank you so much for the love and support you showed me. I think I'm going to log out now. As for now, goodbye. I've decided to start therapy. I confronted my parents and brother about their behavior and ended up disowning them. I sent my mother's nasty messages to the leader of her church, and now she and her husband are shunned by their community. Relevant comments. Commenter. Maybe once your father is actually divorced and gone NC with her and your brother, there's a basis for some rekindling of your relationship. But wow. OP, perhaps, but as of now I don't want to think about it. He's been a supportive dad, but he's never once defended me in his life. His love was unconditional until my mother decided it was in fact conditional. And sometimes, it really felt like his love was just something on and off. I don't want to stick around to see when the magic spell will wear off.